All right, Avi, do you know what we're doing now? We're going to go into
No, what are we
something
doing
that
now?
isn't news related, but it is
Okay.
something that's interesting. The biggest lies we tell ourselves in open source.
Yeah.
Okay. What are
Okay.
the biggest lies that we tell ourselves in open source? Now, I have a list.
You have a list.
I have a list.
Okay.
Now, Avi doesn't have a list, but Avi
I
has
don't.
some ideas, and he thought about writing them down, but that's just too much work. So we're going to go through my list, and Avi's going to tell me if I'm wrong or not. And I'm going to tell him that he's wrong. So, that's how we roll.
enough.
Okay? All right.
Cool.
So what are the biggest lies in open source? Okay, number one, let's get to it. It's driven by individuals more than corporations. Now, we just saw that
We had
earlier.
that one already.
Yeah. We just saw that earlier in this stream, this recording, that the biggest contributors to open source are corporations. It's many individuals, yes, but there is a tint that is going to be directed towards those individuals. Now, a lot of people think that it is some geek in a back room. It's doing something, behind the scenes. It's not. It's the corporations. Now, number two, okay, it's free. Open source is not free. You might be able to get the software for free, but there is a cost to running it. It's free like a puppy or a baby, right? You can totally make that baby. You can totally buy that or, find that puppy at the kennel for free potentially, but you have to care for it and feed it. Agree?
Oh, very much agree. Absolutely. It's a tough one, especially because that cost is very hidden. It's very delayed sometimes.
Absolutely.
Very tough to reason about, I think, in general. And what we see is just that a lot of companies are very bad at it.
Yep. Number three, you will reduce your costs by simply moving to open source.
Yeah, maybe there could be like an asterisk of like, if you know what you're doing and are very good at it.
But even that's a cost, right? Like, so, in order to have that person who's really good at it or can do it, you have to maintain them. There's a salary. But I think that a lot of people will assume like they associate costs with licensing or moving from that proprietary stack, right? So if I ditch Oracle, for instance, I saved $100,000 a year. That's awesome. But are you going to get a support contract for your Postgres database? Are you going to hire Postgres DBAs who can actually fix the code or fix bugs? There's other costs that are associated with it. And while you can reduce costs, there is a cost to potentially make that project better as well. And a lot of bigger companies who rely on this open source software end up having to hire people who will contribute back patches and things that are important to them. I know Avi's getting...
I think this is basically like number two is very similar to this in the sense that like, oh yeah, it's free. No, just kidding. It's not. And then, oh yeah, reducing costs. Yeah, because it's free.
Well, yeah, they do go hand in hand. So you're saying I should combine these. You're wrong. They're separate. Anyways. All right, fair enough. Number four, if you build it, they will come. If you build an open source project, they will not necessarily come.
It's true.
Just slapping open source on it does not guarantee adoption.
I've experienced that firsthand with many projects. Sometimes, I often will just build things for myself anyway, so I don't really care too much. But like, yeah, a lot of things I've built and put out there and just no one cares.
It's a lot of work to get people to care.
It's a ton of work. It's more work than building the thing usually.
Even popular projects require a lot of work to get people to pay attention.
Yeah. This is one where like, I don't know how many people actually believe this, but I'm sure if they do, they don't believe it for long.
I think more people believe it than you think.
Oh, maybe. Well, I'm sure it'll work itself out.
But once you do get that adoption and they do come, millions of users equal business opportunities and revenue.
Yep.
That is not the case. Right?
Not at all. Yeah, especially if you're like a library, like not a transitive dependency of a lot of people. Like that's not, it's very tough, very tough. But if you're dealing with this, you should give us a shout at Scarf. We can help.
Whoa, look at that plugging.
Yeah, got to do it.
Open source is not a business model. Right?
Yeah.
You agree?
Agreed. Oh yeah.
A lot of people think it
is. It is not.
Yeah.
It is a distribution model for your software.
There you go.
Not a business.
Cloud providers are bad for open source.
As we saw a couple slides ago, some of those cloud providers are the biggest open source contributors.
Yeah. But I think that one of the things that when we talk about this, because there's a lot of debate on like, oh, there's strip mining of open source, right? The cloud has enabled lots of open source projects to have the ability to build and make the software that they have. A lot of the build farms, a lot of the environments that people are using are cloud-based. And, those are environments that people might not necessarily have the ability to have access to and start using at the same rate that the cloud enables. So anyways, I think it's a,
But can we agree that, while cloud providers are bad for open source, like net aggregate, I think is definitely a lie. But I don't think it's a false statement to say that the cloud does have certain adverse effects for those that want to commercialize their open source.
No more than other vendors. Okay.
I don't agree with that at all. Interesting. Yeah, why do you think that?
Well, okay. So
also, we're close to time. We'll have to wrap this up quickly.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on. We can have that debate later. So
okay.
Let's go through the rest. Open source will eliminate any vendor lock-in. Here's the funny thing. If you are using open source and you have deployed it through thousands of machines and across thousands of things, it's kind of a lock into that project, and you might be beholden to license changes, as we've seen that do happen.
Yeah. I think that people will it's open source. It's not a vendor to be locked into.
Yeah.
Which is not always true.
Anyways, moving on. We're almost done. Open source will lead to a successful exit. So if you slap open source on your startup, you'll get lots of VC money, and then it will eventually get like 1,000 times the value.
That's AI now.
Oh, okay. So we have open source has been replaced by AI. See, AI's dead to me. Never mentioned that again.
What I mean is, if you're trying to raise money, you should probably slap some AI in your deck. And you may have
open source AI. Yeah. Okay. There you go.
Yeah. All right,
community is a commercial support substitute.
Yeah, that's a funny one. I mean, it can be sometimes.
And open source is
we get an 11
equivalent to freemium. That's the biggest lies in open source.
Yeah.
I don't think you disagree with any of those, right? I think they're all pretty standard.
No, I think all of those were very either not surprising or, something that like is obviously true or false to me. Yeah.
Well, there you go. That's the biggest lies in open source, and that is our tech apocalypse episode of the Hacking Open Source Business Podcast. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.